Last weekend, me and Matt Harmon went in depth on the rookie wide receivers, and one of you guys commented, I can't remember who it was, to say that I should go over the entire rookie class, a buy, sell, hold report on the quarterback class, on the running back class, on the wide receiver class, and the tight end class. So that's exactly what I'm doing today. Today I'm going to be going through every major fantasy relevant rookie that we've seen play games this year and talk about whether I would buy them, whether I would sell them, and whether I would hold them. Talking about, guys who are soft sells, soft buys, hard sells, and guys that are just holds. So if you enjoy this video at any point, leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel if you guys play Dynasty Fantasy Football. Now let's get into it. All right, so we're going to kick things off with the rookie running back class. And as you guys can see, I have the full list of rookie running backs on the screen right now. Not all of these guys have been fantasy relevant. Anybody that's kind of outside of my top 70, 75 overall dynasty running backs, I'm not going to really touch on. But those guys would just be considered holds unless for whatever reason you loved them pre-draft and you wanted to buy on those guys. But for the most part, we're going to focus on the top end dudes. So the major conversation point starts right at the top of the dynasty running back rankings with Bijan Robinson, who right now I have listed as a hard buy. So he's listed as the RB1 on Keep Trade Cut. He is the RB1 in my dynasty rankings, but I think the perception around Bijan Robinson is the reason why I think he's a hard buy, because his price tag, in my opinion, should be much higher than that of the rest of the running back position. Because, I get the temptation of putting Jahmyr Gibbs at RB1 or putting Breece Hall at RB1 or hell, even Christian McCaffrey at RB1. But the way I look at the running back position is how many running backs can you project for 5+ years of dominant RB1 workhorse type of usage? The answer is 0 other than Bijan Robinson. With Breece Hall, he's the next closest for me as my RB2. But he's 2 years through his rookie contract already, so he's more of a 3 to 4 year projection. What we know about Bijan Robinson is that he's an elite talent. We've seen that through 10 games so far, and I really do think he's going to sun run the rest of the entire season as well, and we're going to see that cemented. So right now, actually, I think is the perfect time to go buy low on Bijan Robinson. He's got 4.9 yards per carry this season, 31 missed tackles forced on 125 carries, and he's a quarterback and a competent head coach away from being the undisputed dominant fantasy asset that I think he can be, while he's only costing you right now maybe a first and a second, or maybe a first and 2 seconds, or maybe at the highest end 2 first-round picks. I think he is worth 3 first-round picks, and I don't think you would have to pay that right now, which is why I think he's a hard buy in Dynasty, because I think his Dynasty value will make him virtually untradeable once we see things put together, once we see a quarterback upgrade, once we see a head coaching change, or maybe Arthur Smith can figure out his stuff here. Bijan Robinson, definitely one of the biggest talking points in rookie drafts, still is one of the biggest talking points now midway through the rookie season, but for me, I think he's a hard buy and a guy that I'm going after. So the guy that was right behind him all of rookie draft season at the running back position was Jahmyr Gibbs. He has been spectacular in his own right, so I think people who put him at RB1 or close to Bijan, it's more so speaking on Jahmyr Gibbs than it is a detriment to Bijan Robinson. The fantasy production has been really good for Jahmyr Gibbs, and the situation factors are pretty good as well. We have a very good team, a very good offense. Jared Goff's a competent quarterback, but he is splitting a backfield to some degree. David Montgomery isn't going anywhere next year based on the contract he signed, which is why I can't put him over Bijan Robinson or over Breece Hall, because, he's going to be in a committee backfield. He's definitely getting valuable touches and receiving work and all that kind of stuff. But for me, he is firmly RB3 in my dynasty rankings at the running back position. He's RB3 on the market right now, so I think he's a firm hold. Not a whole lot to discuss with Jahmyr Gibbs, but recap of his rookie season has basically been he was good in college, he is good in the NFL, and there's nothing really else to report on that. So Devon Achane is one other guy that we probably have to talk about a little bit more, because he was not considered the RB7 in Dynasty coming into this season. He is currently the RB7 in my Dynasty rankings, the RB7 in Keep Trade Cuts Dynasty rankings. This one is really tough with Devon Achane, because not only is Achane the highest graded rookie running back according to PFF, he's the highest graded running back, period, according to PFF right now. And with Achane, it's such a small sample size, but we know what the fireworks looked like. I lean on the side that Achane might be a soft sell in Dynasty right now, because I think the reason for that is relying on small sample sizes and expecting that he's going to do that over the course of his entire career is pretty foolish most of the time. And also, I think some of the concerns that I had about Devon Achane coming into his rookie season are rearing its ugly head. He's never going to be a workhorse. He's 185 pounds. He's already suffering some injuries, and we're seeing that play out right now. I'm not saying saying he's going to be a bad fantasy asset, but the positives are enough to keep him all the way up at RB7 in my Dynasty rankings. He looks awesome. He's an elite breakaway speed type of runner. It's clearly a very good situation with the Miami Dolphins. If I had Devon Achane, what I would be looking to do is try and get a little bit more of a projectable volume type of play and some additional value on top of it. So if you could sell Devon Achane and a second round pick for Travis Etienne and a first round pick, or Devon Achane for Javonte Williams and a first round pick or something like that, that's probably the type of package I would move off of Devon Achane for. If not, I would just hold him. He's definitely a very solid dynasty running back going forward, but that's about the range that I'm starting to consider him. He's probably going to be a little bit less valuable than maybe some people are building him up to be in their minds right now. So the rest of the running back class, I'll go a little bit faster with these guys. Those were the major talking points. Zach Charbonnet, very good player, clearly. We just saw him have, a decent game in his first game without Kenneth Walker. He's the 19th highest graded running back on Pro Football Focus right now. It's really tough to know what to think of the split with Zach Charbonnet. As of right now, I lean that he's probably a soft buy, if not just a hold, because he's clearly a good player, and that's really all you kind of need to be at the running back position. So if you have Charbonnet, I would probably just hold him. And then I grouped a bunch of guys in here together with guys that we think are good. We don't know if these guys are going to be elite dynasty assets anytime soon, but we think they're good players, and that makes them valuable for dynasty. So Keaton Mitchell is undrafted free agent running back for the Baltimore Ravens, who's been very good. He's kind of been like mini Achane because 91.5 PFF rushing grade. That is second in the entire NFL right now, only to Devon Achane. And he's averaging 10.3 yards per attempt right now, yards per carry, which is also very good. 11 missed tackles forced on 20 carries. He's been really solid so far, but again, it is a small sample size. I lean on probably selling Keaton Mitchell to try and tier up at this position, but it's also possible that he becomes a major fixture of this backfield down the stretch of the season. So maybe hold off on selling him if you have him right now. Just kind of thank your lucky stars you picked him up on waivers or whatever and kind of wait and see what happens maybe until the offseason. So Roschon Johnson, also a guy that I think is probably pretty good just based on what I've seen from him. 4.5 yards per carry. He's looked good as a wide receiver also. 71.7 PFF grade. We still need more information on Roschon Johnson. I would love to see how his rookie season closes out now that Deontay Foreman's banged up, Khalil Herbert's back. I want to see him kind of try and work his way more into this backfield, but I will say I think he's a soft buy at RB35 plus price tags where you can get him for right now. Tajay Spears, another rookie running back that I think is definitely good. Just objectively looking at Tennessee Titans games, he makes people miss. He's got 5.2 yards per carry right now as a runner, some big plays as a receiver. RB29 is where he's ranked according to Keep Trade Cut. That's a high price tag, in my opinion, just because he's smaller. He had some injury issues coming out of college. I don't see him as like a long-term fixture, being a workhorse for the Titans or anything like that. Maybe you can use Tajay Spears in a package deal to upgrade at the position because he's probably capped as like a mid RB2 at the absolute best case scenario in terms of like his workload going forward in any given season, because they're not going to just like go into next year, cut bait with Derrick Henry and have Tajay Spears be the lead back. That's just never going to happen. They're going to add somebody else or keep Derrick Henry around for a little bit longer. So Tajay Spears, probably a soft sell, but he is probably a good player. So definitely good news there. Jaleel McLaughlin, definitely a nice find off the waiver wire for those of you guys that picked him up in Dynasty. 6.1 yards per carry, 14th highest graded running back in the NFL this year. I would probably just hold him as depth. I don't think he's anything more than that. And then some of the guys that have been disappointing, but I'm still holding out hope for some of them. Kendre Miller has been really disappointing so far because he's super young, and I thought there was a chance that he would work his way a lot more into this backfield, but it's pretty clear that Alvin Kamara is still the lead back here, and Jamal Williams is still the second in command here. There's some outs in those guys' contracts over the next 2 seasons, so maybe if you are a tanking team or if you're looking for a lot more younger production, maybe send out some offers for Kendre Miller and try and get him for cheap. But I'd imagine the person that drafted him took him in like the mid-second round and probably isn't going to want to cut bait just yet. So keep that in mind for Kendre Miller. Chase Brown, a guy that I really loved coming into the season, has done nothing so far, probably free in Dynasty leagues, and I liked the prospect, like I said. So I would say he's a good throw-in if you're trying to do a package deal, but other than that, I probably wouldn't buy into him too much. Sean Tucker, he might just not be very good. So I would hold him if you have him, maybe sell if somebody loved the prospect profile of him. Deuce Vaughn, I thought he could carve out the Rico Dowdle role that we're seeing in Dallas there. I guess not, but I would probably hold him as well. And then Israel Abanikanda looked good in preseason for the New York Jets. He might actually be a good player, but we just haven't seen him on the field yet. And I honestly, I would wish that the Jets start taking Dalvin Cook off the field and start putting Israel Abanikanda on the field because he's clearly a lot better than Dalvin Cook. So probably just a hold for him as well. So moving on to the quarterback position, for those of you guys that play in Superflex leagues, that's kind of the frame of mind that I'm approaching this from. If you guys are in one quarterback leagues, maybe you just want to skip ahead of the wide receivers and tight ends. But I do think these guys are still very important topics to talk about. So it starts and ends with CJ Stroud. He has obviously been the biggest riser, I would say, preseason to now in terms of any position group in this rookie class, in terms of overall value in Dynasty. With CJ Stroud right now, the question is, how high does he rank among quarterbacks in Dynasty? Because right now, his current keep trade cut value is quarterback 3, which I believe is absolutely absurd. That's too high. But at the same time, he also is a very valuable quarterback asset because a lot of the guys that he's ranking around, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts and, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, these guys are in their like mid to late 20s, most of them. With CJ Stroud, you're getting a guy who's like 22 years old. So if you're in a startup draft in a room where you think, a lot of people are going to go contending, going to go win now, CJ Stroud actually does make quite a lot of sense as a top 10 startup pick. But at the same time, I can't value him ahead of Josh Allen, ahead of Justin Herbert, ahead of Joe Burrow, and ahead of Lamar Jackson, because he is somewhat limited by the fact that he's a pass-first quarterback. He doesn't rush at all, and even though he's a young guy, and I think he's going to be around for a very long time, he's basically a young version of Joe Burrow or Dak Prescott. I still can't quite get him to that level until I see a little bit more. But regardless, he's obviously a very, very good asset. I'm sure you want to hold him if you drafted CJ Stroud. Maybe a soft sell if you can get to any of those other quarterbacks. But for the most part, I would say he is probably a guy you are very, very happy with where you drafted him. Anthony Richardson is the other major quarterback riser, I would say, from the beginning of the year. Had he stayed healthy, there's definitely a case for him to be above CJ Stroud, given that the nature of fantasy football is that we love rushing quarterbacks, especially in 4-point per passing touchdown leagues. Quarterbacks who run are simply just more valuable. They score more fantasy points. So Anthony Richardson is my quarterback 9 right now in my Dynasty rankings. But don't get it twisted with Anthony Richardson. This is not a guarantee. He's still very much a volatile bet because, as we saw with Justin Fields this past year, there's periods of time where we're going to be concerned that Anthony Richardson might not be that great of a passer. He had a 56.5 PFF passing grade in the 3 games he started for the Colts so far as a rookie, 71.1% adjusted completion percentage, 6.9 yards per attempt as a passer. Those are pedestrian numbers. So we're looking at a guy that has a little bit more volatility than CJ Stroud. Like, I'm certain CJ Stroud is a good quarterback. I'm pretty sure that Anthony Richardson is a good quarterback. But if he hits, we could be talking about a guy that is potentially the future 101 in Dynasty startups, or potentially a top 5 pick in Dynasty startups, given his age, given his rushing prowess. Definitely a big hit if he can develop. But I would hold him if you guys have Anthony Richardson, or if you're trying to rebuild and tank, maybe buy him to get those point production players off of your team, as we talked about in our Dynasty trading video, which is available on our site, Flock Fantasy. That is the only way you guys can find that video talking about in-season trading. One of the aspects that we talked about was, as a Dynasty player, when you're rebuilding, you want to try and buy low on injured players, and Anthony Richardson would be a good example of that. So definitely check that out in the pinned comment if you're interested. Bryce Young is the other major Dynasty quarterback prospect that we have to talk about here, because unfortunately for me, the quarterback that I thought was the best quarterback prospect in this class was Bryce Young, and he was the guy that I drafted quite a decent amount because of that reason. And he's now gone from the most valuable quarterback, or at least him and Anthony Richardson were a conversation before rookie drafts. He went to the worst situation. He's looked the worst of these 3 quarterbacks so far. And people are now panicking a little bit, and they're downgrading his Dynasty value. However, I have seen enough promise from Bryce Young to say that this offense and Frank Reich and the whole situation are not doing him any favors. And I think that Frank Reich will be one and done, and they'll get a new, young up-and-coming coaching staff in here. But I will say, it is very dependent on cost with Bryce Young. I'm not just going to say confirmation bias. He was my quarterback 1 before the draft. He still is now. Like, of course not. He would definitely be my quarterback 3 if I was redrafting this rookie class. And I definitely wouldn't pay exactly what I paid for him during the rookie draft as well. But if his price, like it says it is on Keep Trade Cut right now, is quarterback 17, and I can sell Sam Howell for him, I can sell Jared Goff for him, I can sell Jordan Love for him, or Deshaun Watson or Will Levis for him, then I'm going to buy low on Bryce Young, and he would be a hard buy for me. But I will say he does still come with quite a bit of risk because he hasn't looked quite as good as I thought he would. But I still do believe in the prospect that I saw at Alabama. And then closing out the quarterback position, we do have Will Levis. who had a monster start to his career, 4-touchdown game in his first NFL start. That got everybody really hot and bothered and all horny for Will Levis, but we're kind of starting to see the real Will Levis in the last couple games. The guy who has a 54.5 PFF passing grade, which is among the worst among all quarterbacks. I was not a fan of the prospects, so I might consider selling Will Levis if I was in your guys' position and I had any Will Levis shares, but I actually don't currently because, I mean, like I said, bad PFF passing grade, 68.4 adjusted completion percentage. That is worse than Anthony Richardson's was. His actual completion percentage is below 60% at 58.5% as well, and he's averaging just 6.9 yards per attempt, which again, very pedestrian numbers. He's a rookie quarterback. They usually don't perform, but it's also not a very good situation long-term. There's not a lot of weapons and fixtures to build around. What I wouldn't do is sell Will Levis straight up for like nothing. I wouldn't sell him for like an early second round pick. I would want a first round caliber asset for him because he is a volatile quarterback, but he could still hit a, high end top 15 quarterback in Dynasty because he has the arm talent. He has, by the looks of it, some of the intangibles to be able to get there. But I will say it's probably more like a 20% chance that actually happens versus an 80% chance that he misses and he's more like Kenny Pickett 2 years from now and the Titans are still looking for a quarterback of the future. So a very difficult discussion with Will Levis. I would say if you have him and you want to sell, I would say a mid to late first round pick of any kind would be enough to get him off my team. If you don't have him and you want to buy him because you really liked Will Levis, the prospect, I would say don't pay anything more than a very late first round pick or an early second rounder plus, or maybe a wide receiver who's valued around that range. So Will Levis is definitely going to be an interesting discussion this offseason once we have more information. But as of now, I lean more on the side of, okay, this is the guy I saw at Kentucky versus this is the guy that we saw in the first game of his NFL career when he threw 4 touchdowns and he wowed us with his arm talent. So just interesting to see with Will Levis there. So everything else at the quarterback position from this class is largely replaceable. I mean, Hendon Hooker and, Aiden O'Connell and all these guys, whatever. Like, hold them if you like them, sell them if you don't like them. If people need production out of Dorian Thompson-Robinson or Aiden O'Connell because they're starting games, just sell them, get them off your team. They're not really worth anything long-term. The wide receiver position is the next one we're going to talk about. And as I talked about at the beginning of the video, I had Matt Harmon on last week to talk about this rookie wide receiver class. So I'm not going to go super in-depth here because we went really in-depth in last week's video. So if you want to check that out, I'll link that down below in the description. That video was focused mainly on these players as talents. What I'm going to focus on is, are they buys, are they sells, and are they holds in Dynasty Fantasy Football? So here's the full list of drafted and undrafted rookie wide receivers from this class. Again, similar to what I did with running backs, I'm going to condense this for only guys that are actually fantasy relevant, guys that are in my top 80 wide receivers in Dynasty. So let's have some big conversations here in terms of Dynasty value. And we'll start with the wide receiver 1 in Dynasty rookie drafts coming into the year, which was Jaxon Smith-Njigba. And the short answer for me is hold JSN because you spent a high pick on him. But I actually lean towards the side of potentially selling on JSN because I think the expectation is that he'll get better as the season goes along, and coming into the offseason, we might view him again as the wide receiver 1 in this class. But as of right now, man, I mean, the one-handed catch that he had yesterday was nice and all, but I would rather have Jordan Addison, I would rather have Zay Flowers, I would rather have Puka Nacua, and I would rather have Tank Dell at this point in time. Jaxon Smith-Njigba's prospect profile can't carry him beyond the point of, return. JSN, for what it's worth, hasn't been bad, but he also hasn't been good either. And it's not just because he's playing with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett on an individual per route run basis, and Harmon talked about this. He just hasn't been impressive so far. So if you can sell JSN for Drake London or for T. Higgins or for any of the rookie wide receivers that I mentioned already, Harmon expressed concern with his talent level. The situation is whatever. I mean, Geno Smith and the Seahawks offense is not like an elite situation to be tied to either. 78th graded wide receiver on PFF right now out of 107 qualified. He's down there with the likes of Rashad Bateman and De'Ami Brown and Quentin Johnston. Not company that you want to see. There's not a lot of data points that I can go to that say JSN is a great player. He's going to be an elite wide receiver in the NFL. What I can point to is that he was a great prospect, and coming into the year, we should have had a little bit more leeway for him, but he's trending towards maybe his prospect profile can't save him for very much longer, because if he doesn't close out this season really strong, it's going to be a conversation that we have in the offseason, and I would rather get ahead of that as a JSN manager and try and sell him for somebody who I know is a great receiver, like Zay Flowers, like Jordan Addison, like Drake London, like T. Higgins, somebody like that in the range of the draft of startups that you're getting JSN right now, because he's still valued as like a top 16, top 18 dynasty wide receiver, and I think he should be more in the early 20s area given what we've seen seen from him so far and the range of outcomes that I think he has. So Jordan Addison and Zay Flowers, two other first-round wide receivers that were expected to be good, and they have been. 7 touchdowns for Jordan Addison, been productive despite the quarterback turmoil with Josh Dobbs and Kirk Cousins and all that stuff, and he's also been forced to be the number 1 receiver here because Justin Jefferson was out for a while. He's my rookie wide receiver 1 if I was redrafting the class today because Jordan Addison was my rookie wide receiver 1 coming into the season for a lot of it. And he's been exactly what I expected. He's been able to get open. He's been able to make an impact, been able to make some big plays. I have him listed as a soft sell here for the reason that he's actually being valued as a dynasty wide receiver 1. I can't quite get there with Jordan Addison right now. I think he's more in the wide receiver 15 to 20 range as well. But I will say if you can sell him for, like I said, Drake London or somebody better than that, use him to get up to Chris Olave or Jalen Waddle or Devontae Smith, which I think you will be able to do in some leagues, then I would probably sell Jordan Addison for that reason. But mainly, he's probably just a hold. And then with Zay Flowers, he's also been underratedly great so far. 25% target share, semi-crowded wide receiver room with Andrews and the other veteran wide receivers there. With not a lot of wide receiver production usually available in this Ravens offense, he's actually been quite good. Wide receiver 34 in PPR points per game. And now with Andrews out for the rest of the season, he might cook down the stretch. We were this close to a monster Zay Flowers breakout game against Cincinnati on Thursday night last week, and we were robbed by an Odell Beckham phantom holding penalty. So with Zay Flowers, I think he's been underratedly good. Maybe buy low on him if people don't realize how good he's been. Harmon was very complimentary of him in terms of his reception perception numbers as well. The other first-round wide receiver has been undoubtedly one of the biggest disappointments in all of rookie drafts. Quentin Johnston, I think, we're on fast track for this guy being a bust. NFL draft-wise, rookie draft-wise, whatever you want to call it. The short answer is this guy might be a bust. And go listen to what Harmon said about him. This is not just my opinion on him. He said, dude, this guy can't get open. He can't separate. He's not very good as a wide receiver right now. And the frustrating thing is that I don't think you could have drawn up a better script for Quentin Johnston. Mike Williams, the guy who he's supposed to replace long-term, gets injured early on in the year. It wouldn't have shocked any of us if Quentin Johnston took over the Mike Williams role, was very good in it, and was like a wide receiver 3 in points per game for the rest of the season, and we were excited about him long-term. That's what I think should have happened, given his profile and given, some of the people that were higher on him probably would have said if I told you guys that, Mike Williams is going to go down in week 3. A lot of people would have drafted Quentin Johnston a lot higher, and even with Josh Palmer, too, also being injured, it's just been a rocky road overall. Herbert is slinging the ball, and Quentin Johnston still sucks, so that's definitely a problem. If you can sell him for any second rounder, I would do it, because he's on fast track to be a face planner, on fast track to be a bust, and those guys go the realm of N'Keal Harry and Jalen Reagor and Laviska Shenault and Rondale Moore, and go ask me how much you can get for those guys in a trade right now, and I think Quentin Johnston might be trending in that direction, so definitely not good news for those of you guys that have a lot of QJ. Puka Nacua and Tank Dell, two of the biggest surprises of this draft class at wide receiver. They're legit studs. Puka and Tank Dell have been gems from the 3rd and the 4th round of rookie drafts where you got them. Tank Dell is the 14th highest graded wide receiver in the NFL right now. 82.3 is his PFF receiving grade, 15.7 yards per catch, and 6 touchdowns on the year. Obviously tied to CJ Stroud in that Texans offense going forward, so he is a very safe projection as like a wide receiver 2 in Dynasty. Over a 27% target share in 3 straight games the last 3 weeks as well. I would say he's a hold for me, but he is kind of getting in the area of a soft sell, because if you can get to, again, I'm going to sound like a broken record here, if you can get to Drake London, if you can get to Chris Olave, if you can get Jalen Waddle, if you can get Garrett Wilson, like, again, you probably can't get these guys straight up, but maybe using Tank Dell, you can get up to them and secure yourself a better asset. And among this rookie class, I would prefer Jordan Addison, and I would prefer Zay Flowers as well. I have him wide receiver 20 right now, Tank Dell, but he is wide receiver 14 in keep trade cuts, so he is a little bit overvalued, at least in my opinion, among the wide receiver landscape. With Puka Nacua, he's also been very good this season, 31% target share. He's averaging 17.8 PPR points per game, which is a top 10 wide receiver on the season, but he has cooled down a lot recently. And Matt Harmon pointed out that he's a good wide receiver, but he should not be considered elite, at least among this rookie class and among Dynasty wide receiver rankings. He was like, he's nowhere close to the talent that Chris Olave is, nowhere close to the talent that Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, Drake London, or even Zay Flowers from from this rookie class are. So definitely, if you want to know more, definitely check that video out. But I think Puka Nacua is probably more in line with he's never going to have a production stretch like that ever in the rest of his career. He's probably a hard sell for me because I think some of your league mates will just look at the fantasy production and be willing to give you a wide receiver 1 price tag for him. You can probably get Chris Olave for him. You can probably get Jalen Waddle for him. You could probably get Devontae Smith for him for some of these price tags that I'm seeing. A lot of you guys DM me, hey, I sold Puka Nacua for Chris Olave in a second. Like, I've seen people say that, and I think it's absolutely absurd that that's what you can get for Puka Nacua on the open market right now. And if you can get that, you should probably be selling him. So other risers from this class, and then I'll talk about some of the disappointments at wide receiver. Josh Downs, I expected a stud slot wide receiver, and we got them. Hold them as a wide receiver 3 in Dynasty. Jaden Reed, also a prospect whose film I liked, and Harmon loved both Josh Downs and Jaden Reed pre-draft. I feel good saying that Jaden Reed has been a hit for like late round 2, early round 3 rookie picks that you spent on him. Probably hold him as well. Maybe a soft sell if you can use him to tier up. Rashee Rice has been better than I thought, but not a superstar in any way. 23% targets per route run is solid, but in my opinion, he should be a full-time starter for Kansas City right now, and he's not. So that's a problem. He's a soft sell if you can get to a better option like Jaden Reed, like Josh Downs from this rookie class, or maybe you can use Rashee Rice and trade him to a rebuilding team for a middle-aged option at wide receiver like a Terry McLaurin or a Chris Godwin or a Deontay Johnson or a Christian Kirk or something like that. I would just much rather have the production that those guys present than the upside swing that Rashee Rice presents, because he plays for Kansas City. People are going to be really excited about him. And then with Demario Douglas, I think he's a firm hold. He's good on you if you drafted him super late or picked him up off waivers, but I don't think you can use him to like tier up or anything like that. I don't think anybody's overly excited about Demario Douglas. And then with Michael Wilson, I mean, people are getting unnecessarily horny about a guy that hasn't really done anything this year. I've seen people say that he's like a great dynasty asset. 14% target share. He's been a full-time player the entire season in a barren wide receiver core with just Marquise Brown there. And if he was much better as a player, he'd be much more fantasy relevant. That's just the reality of Michael Wilson. He's fine. I would sell him though if you guys can help it, because he's still valued as like a top 45 dynasty wide receiver for some apparent reason. And he kind of just reminds me of like Alec Pierce from last year. He's been okay, but he's not really that good. So he's more likely to get replaced by someone better in future drafts, and maybe Marvin Harrison this year. So I would probably sell Michael Wilson while I still can. Some of the biggest disappointments from the wide receiver class, it starts and ends with Jonathan Mingo, who was a borderline first-round rookie pick for a lot of people. And this is looking a lot like the Denzel Mims situation, where we have an athletic wide receiver coming into a barren wide receiver core, and he does absolutely nothing. Out of 107 graded wide receivers for PFF right now, Jonathan Mingo checks in at 102 behind Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Allen Lazard, and DJ Chark. We're talking about a guy who's out there running wind sprints in an offense that is desperate for somebody to step up. Bryce Young needs all the help he can get, and the reality is if they took Josh Downs, or if they took Tank Dell, or if they took Puka Nacua instead of Jonathan Mingo, they would be absolutely tearing up that offense, because Carolina has a lot of targets up for grabs. Hell, I don't know why they didn't trade for an established wide receiver instead of taking Jonathan Mingo in the early second round. If I was the Panthers, I definitely would not have selected him that high in the draft. Sell if you can get anything resembling a second round dynasty rookie pick, in my opinion, because I don't think Jonathan Mingo was a very good prospect. I think he had a chance to be a good developmental option, but dynasty players are not very patient, and I think his value could really, really skyrocket down as opposed to skyrocket up like it should have done. And this is why you don't just trust the draft capital. Like, I saw a lot of people saying, oh, I'm going to take Jonathan Mingo in the first round of my rookie draft because he went in the top 35 picks. I'm like, you also need to understand where his prospect profile was and how he would kind of develop at the next level. And it hasn't worked out so far. And honestly, I don't see it ever working out, just given the profile that he had. Marvin Mims, the big plays have been nice, but I'm not overly excited about him. Probably just hold him. Jalen Hyatt, same thing. Probably should be better than he has been, but there's been some flashes for Jalen Hyatt. He's had a couple big plays here and there. And the quarterback situation is really, really bad right now, and it might get better if Daniel Jones comes back or we just get a rookie quarterback in 2024. Cedric Tillman, I wanted to see more now that Donovan Peoples-Jones has been gone, but he's getting the routes now, so hopefully he can turn things around for the rest of the season. Probably a soft buy, if not just a hold, but only for dirt cheap. I wouldn't spend anything going after him. And then some sleepers, Trey Palmer, Dontavian Wicks. Both guys have flashed for some big plays. Probably just hold them if you guys drafted those players. Not sure anybody is really excited about them, but maybe they make for good holds or throw-ins. The tight end class, and then we'll close out this video. It was billed as elite coming in, and it has definitely been a very, very needed injection of youth at this position because, I mean, the tight end one conversation basically started and ended with Kyle Pitts last offseason because he was the only good young tight end in the entire NFL. Everybody else was Travis Kelce or Dallas Goedert or, George Kittle, all these guys that are like 27, 28 years old. Kyle Pitts had such a monopoly on young tight ends to the point that he was the only sub 24-year-old tight end that was worth a damn. And now we have Sam LaPorta, who's having a monster breakout season. A couple of down games recently, but he scored on Thanksgiving yesterday. He has 5 touchdowns on the season. He's a top 3 fantasy tight end on the year, and that's absolutely ridiculous because rookies don't usually produce at this position. But we heard from a lot of NFL draft scouts, this is a great tight end class. And I can tell you as somebody that scouted all these players, this was a great tight end class. So hold on to Sam LaPorta as potentially the tight end 1 in Dynasty, if not a top 3 tight end. And thank your lucky stars you didn't draft Jonathan Mingo instead because you needed a wide receiver. So Dalton Kincaid also been very consistent the past couple weeks since the Dawson Knox injury. He's the tight end 5 over the last 5 games, with 15 PPR points over that stretch. That is studly production for a guy that was already a great prospect, was drafted in the first round, is tethered to Josh Allen going forward. So he's a top 3 dynasty tight end in my opinion. And if you have him, just hold him and enjoy him because he's going to be a productive piece for you and he's still pretty young. So Michael Mayer is the other like big 3 tight end from this class that hasn't quite been as lucky as Sam LaPorta and Dalton Kincaid because he didn't go to the Lions or the Bills. He went to the Raiders, who have fired their coach, but he's still an elite prospect, or he was, coming out of Notre Dame, and he's the youngest of these 3 tight ends. And since he's taken over the starting job for his team, he's actually commanded 16% target share or better in 5 of his last 7 games. The Raiders are going to probably upgrade at quarterback in the coming months. They're going to upgrade at head coach in the coming months. Devontae Adams will probably leave this team in the coming months. So Michael Mayer, if you guys are rebuilding, if you're an orphan team, or if you just have no chance of winning anytime soon, I think Michael Mayer is a perfect buy and hold and see kind of what happens because he was a great prospect and he still looks the part when you watch him on Sundays for the Raiders. But yeah, closing out the tight end position, we also have the last discussion point, which is who's the real tight end 1 in Green Bay, because Luke Musgrave has been operating with the same workload really that Sam LaPorta and Dalton Kincaid have had the last couple weeks, like 75-80% of the team's routes. Only Luke Musgrave is posting like 7 points per game. So it's kind of showing itself that he might not be the greatest tight end in the world. Yeah, he's a rookie and he could get better. But it took Tucker Kraft all but 1 game to come out and outproduce what Luke Musgrave has done the entire season. He scores a touchdown, 75-plus PFF receiving grade, which is something Luke Musgrave has not done all year. I preferred Kraft to Musgrave coming into rookie drafts, and once they were both drafted to Green Bay, I said, hey, I would rather take Tucker Kraft in round 4 than Luke Musgrave in round 3. And Musgrave was literally gift-wrapped an elite role and is barely a tight end 2 in points per game. So for me, with Tucker Kraft, I would love to see what happens the next couple games while Luke Musgrave is on IR. And I think that Tucker Kraft is a guy that maybe you want to invest in on the cheap right now. So that is the rookie report, the buy, sell, hold report for all of the major fantasy relevant rookies. Let me know down below if you disagreed with anything. Let me know down below who you're buying, who you're selling, who you're holding right now in Dynasty. If you enjoyed this type of content, leave a like down below, subscribe. If you play Dynasty Fantasy Football, you're definitely going to want to stay tapped in around here with the rookie draft season right around the corner. And also, if you want access to all of our Dynasty rankings, all of our 2024 prospect rankings, all of our trade value charts, all of our tiers, all that good stuff to help you play Dynasty Fantasy Football better, that is available on flockfantasy.com. Use the promo code FSE for 30% off. Definitely check out our brand new Dynasty trade calculator as well. You guys can get access to that when you sign up for a free account for free for the rest of the weekend. And then going forward, you will need a subscription to use that Dynasty trade calculator. But I promise you, that is just one of all of the major features that we have available on Flock Fantasy. So definitely check that out if you're interested. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.